Michael, welcome to the Automation Solution Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to be here with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This is an exciting topic, especially given everything that we've gone through as a country with the pandemic, and typically our listeners, just so you know, we have C-level folks, engineering managers, production managers, all typically in the food, beverage, plastics, building materials industries, and we do have other manufacturing. But what we want to do is we want to gear this message towards the machine as a service. It's a topic that I know you're very familiar with prior to this whole pandemic, and I think that you're going to be able to shed some light on what the value is for the end user. And so if it's okay with you, I just want to kind of start from the top, and if you can, just so everybody knows, can you give everybody a little background about Pearson and yourself?
Right, yeah. So Pearson Packaging Systems, we are a secondary packaging machinery OEM. We produce primarily case erectors, top load robotic case packers, case sealers, robotic palletizers, and then we have a division that provides complete end of line solutions, our system solutions group. We primarily serve the food, beverage, personal care, I would say pharma/healthcare industries, and
Okay.
some, and the chemical industry as well. So pretty typical CPG type companies.
Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of, and we, were founded in 1955. And so this is our 65th year of being in business.
And congratulations. That's a big accomplishment. So let's talk about the machine as a service. When did you first, I guess, hear about it and start to take action on it?
Well, it's funny. I think, I've shared this story with a couple of people. Ironically, I think what ended up happening is we were aware of the model from the software industry. So I came from Microsoft
Right.
Corporation before I entered the packaging machinery industry, and so was familiar with the model. And we kind of stumbled into it probably, I mean, I don't know an exact date, but I would guess probably 7 to 10 years ago. And we had a customer that actually, a potential customer that wanted to, we had some used equipment in our facility. They
Okay.
didn't have a budget, and they actually asked us if we would be willing to kind of more or less rent it to them based on an output basis.
Huh.
And we said, well, sure. The machines aren't really doing anything. They're unproductive assets. They're just kind of sitting there. And so we worked out something. And the idea is that we didn't do it on a per case basis at first. What we decided we'd do is based on the wear and tear we thought that the machines would incur on their output. We said, this is what we're going to go ahead and charge you on a periodic basis. And they said, great. Well, what was interesting is about a year, 18 months later, we were still sending them invoices. They were still running the equipment. And we said, hey, you could probably have purchased this equipment by now.
Right.
Had you actually just purchased it, in the used market. And they're, no, we don't want to do that. We have to go through a different process. We're paying for this out of the savings that we're generating, by automating. So it was an interesting deal where we kind of looked at that experience and said, hey, this is almost like an as a service model. It
Right.
was just cumbersome and very manual. And so that's what kind of and that happened 2 or 3 times over the last probably 7 years. But
Okay.
then we really started talking about, hey, let's do this the right way. Let's try to find a technology platform where we can actually do this properly, that we can automate these processes. We can use a distributed ledger system like blockchain, something like that, to adjudicate the contract. And that's really been, a year ago is when well, it was 18 months ago when we hooked up with SteamChain.io.
Okay.
And they gave us the platform that we had really been looking for that would automate, that process. And we just kind of jumped in with both feet from that point and have been trying to evangelize it ever since.
And what do you think so far? Looking back, I know you've been. We know the Steam Chain folks as well here at RōBEX,
Yep.
and what do you think? Are you happy with what you've seen so far? Are customers starting to get used to the idea, the concept?
Yeah, I am very happy with what we've seen. I mean, at the same time, there's a little bit of frustration that it's not even moving faster than it is. Because I can be a little bit impatient about that,
Hmm.
as I'm sure you and
Oh yeah.
others could be
Yes.
as well. Um, but I think we're very pleased. I mean, it's we're very pleased by the response we're getting from customers in terms of they buy into the idea, they like it, they like how it aligns, our activities with their end goals. It's a great, alternative to the capital equipment procurement process.
Right.
I think where we've been a little bit, I wouldn't say frustrated, but where we've had to be more patient has been we're now selling to different people in the finance departments of some of these companies. We're actually dealing with not just the plant engineers or not just the plant managers or the maintenance personnel. It's a different sale to a different constituency. And that's taking more time than it used to.
Yeah, that's so we had several questions come in on LinkedIn prior to this interview. And one of the questions, and this person wanted to remain anonymous, but they wanted to know the sales channel. So we, talking to engineers, plant managers, that's what we do. So now how is it working? You're still going through an engineer, I assume, because you've got to sell the concept, the idea, the
Right.
solution. And then where are you going from there? How's it moving through the company?
Well, it really depends if it's a large company or if it's a small company. It's interesting because we don't have really close relationships with some of those individuals, like in large Fortune 500 customers, which are the majority of our customers.
Right.
We've always worked on the engineering, either the corporate or the plant engineering side of things, most of the time.
Right.
They're actually having to make those introductions. They're actually putting us in front of different people within their organization. And so we're really kind of dependent on them to kind of guide us. With some of the smaller companies, in fact, we closed a project yesterday, on a machine as a service basis. It was really kind of an interesting process. It was a much smaller company, much smaller output. We were actually able to, deal with the CEO and the decision maker, and he was the individual we were able to reach out to. He bought into the concept, and it was a much more streamlined process.
That's awesome. Just curious, how long did that take from the time you identified a need, provided a solution, and were able to bring it
Probably
together?
about a month.
Yeah,
I would
that's
say
great.
it was, and again, it was really convincing them that our technical solution was the best solution, was what really took the majority of that month. Is that
Yeah,
our machinery actually met their needs better than the competitors.
right.
And then really we just presented the machinery as a service model, separately and kind of, as an alternative to traditional procurement. And he bought into that right away. So that
Yeah,
probably was a week.
yeah, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Great example. And then so here's kind of there's a lot of questions that came in. There's a topic around risk, service and maintenance, who's responsible, the payments, the outcomes, and then there was a specific one for you that we'll get into at the end. But let's talk about like risk. So traditional capital purchase, like we're all used to. Once the customer takes the delivery, the integrator's done doing their startup, outside of a warranty, that's usually the risks now falls solely on the end user. In your program that Pearson offers, machine as a service, how does the risk shift, or does it shift? Just help our listeners maybe understand that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's an asset that we own. So so we own the piece of equipment, and we're really truly selling them the output. So
Okay.
let's just say it's a case erector. Every time that case erector successfully erects a case, we're being paid, on that. There's no minimum, kind of number of cases per year. There's no maximum number of cases per year. I mean, obviously that would that would be dictated just by the total ability of the machine,
Right.
the top speed of the machine over time. Um, there's no minimum number of months or cycles that you have to run. So we're really assuming that risk. The vast majority of our customers have very significant long-term needs for equipment. And so
Right.
we really deemed that risk as something we're more than willing to take. So those are assets that are on our balance sheet. They're in our customers' facilities. We get paid as they produce cases, or as they pack cases, or as they seal or palletize cases.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, if we're hopeful that if that piece of equipment is meeting their expectations, it's helping them meet the needs of their customers, and the fulfillment of their orders to their customers, that they're going to be happy with it, and they're going to keep it, just like they would a normal piece of equipment. And so we're really assuming the risk of keeping that piece of equipment up and running. We're providing the spare parts to them, the wear parts, so that the machine performance doesn't degrade over time. And I think the best part of it is that it does shift the risk, I think, a little to us, because we need to ensure that that asset, that piece of equipment, is actually running and meeting the needs of the customer. Because if it's not, they don't own it. They can simply unplug it, return it to us, in
Yep.
a previously agreed upon shape. And so it really aligns our activities from a service and a support perspective to ensure that they're satisfied with it and it's meeting their production requirements. Because if it isn't, they have an alternative. They can send that piece of equipment back to us, or if it's just not running, we're not being paid for it. And so it's I think a really positive. It's a really positive relation. I think it drives a very much more positive relationship than traditionally shipping out a piece of equipment and it becoming the responsibility of the end user.
No, that's great. And I think that's one point I hope our listeners take away is that this does, I think, creates a different relationship with, the OEM, the integrator, and the end user, that, everybody wants it to be successful. So this is not a one and done, sell it
Right.
and good luck with everything. Here's the keys. So that's one thing that we try to make sure we get across with our customers, is that it's, this is a partnership, true partnership, which
Yep.
is great. Now you're taking on, let me go back a question on the risk. So what happens if an end user just isn't using it? I mean,
Well, so first of all, I mean, I think that's part of the process of qualifying,
yeah,
really any customer for that, for that matter, as part of the sales process.
yeah,
As I mentioned, most of our customers, we're very fortunate that most of our customers are very, very high volume, multiple shifts a day, moderate to high speeds. And so the likelihood, like when I look at the equipment that we put out in the field right now under the traditional procurement process,
right,
very few of those assets, that our customers purchase, very few of them remain idle.
right.
And so, we have an ideal customer profile that we try to adhere to. And so we really have just determined that the likelihood that any of them would ever really have a need or an ability even to turn that piece of equipment, to leave it idle and have it not, run for any significant period of time. We just don't think that that's a significant risk given our kind of carefully curated customer base that we do business with.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Is that qualifications is key. It's you
Yeah,
got to partner with people that are looking at this thing as a win-win for Pearson as
right.
well.
And we're not trying, we're not using it to try to open up a market for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford equipment. I mean, that is one benefit, of
Right.
the model, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. But the fact of the matter is that we're actually promoting this to the customers that we've really done business with for many, many years. And so we feel like we've got good relationships with them. We feel like we understand their business. We feel like we understand their needs, and we think it's a good fit.
Yeah, and have you seen because of the way that the whole capital purchase planning and there's a lot that goes around that, as you know, are you seeing your customers moving quickly, more rapidly, because they have this option? So they're, instead of buying one case erector as an example, they might buy four and buy maybe one and put three on a machine as a service. Are you seeing the speed of automation pick up with this option?
No, I mean, admittedly, not really yet. I mean, it's typically they've defined the need that they have.
Right.
Our experience has been they're defining, how much output they need. It might be one or case director, two, four, or whatever. Um, and really, it's just an alternative, to procurement. We're not seeing a huge uptake, or uptick rather. I'm sorry, in additional automation at this point in time. And I think that has to do with the fact that with a lot of our customers, um, they've been a little slower to move and adopt this model. I think you've probably had some experience with that. Some
Mhm.
people, they really, really love the idea. It's a great way to automate very quickly. It really creates and forges that strong partnership between OEM and end customer. but they have some other concerns, and some of those other concerns are remote connectivity,
Yep.
persistent internet connections, blockchain, things like that, which we're able to overcome, but that can kind of slow the process down a little bit. And so I would say that it's a pretty similar cadence to our normal sales cycle. It is being slowed down a little bit, as we're having to meet with these other personnel kind of in our, in our end customers.
If you didn't have the machine as a service option and you were selling just traditionally, would you have sold as much? I mean, do you think that you're gaining some extra business from your customers because of the option that it's available?
I think we are. I mean, I think that, and that's part of the deal is we're looking at these and we think that the majority of these are well, I don't know really the majority, a significant portion of them are and will be incremental business,
Gotcha. Okay.
and you and I have kind of talked in the past where, it's interesting. A lot of our customers have very, very high hurdles in order, financial hurdles that need to be met in order
Right.
to actually automate a process, in order to get funding. What's really it, but we had one customer, for example, and we're working through the process with them. We have not sold them something through MaaS yet, but they had a very, very high IRR requirement. I think it was 21, 22%, somewhere in there.
Yep.
The automation of our equipment would really have only probably netted an IRR percentage of 16 or 17. So it was still accretive to their bottom line, but it
Mhm.
didn't meet the requirements to get funding. That's a perfect example where it still creates value for the end customer. They're able to pay and for the equipment out of the savings that they otherwise wouldn't have had if they didn't automate. And so we are seeing people respond to that. And so I would consider that to be incremental revenue. It's an
Yeah.
incremental sale that we'll end up making that we wouldn't have made because of their internal financial hurdles that wouldn't have been met.
No, agree. Completely agree. That's great. And we talked about, you mentioned service a little bit. So, traditionally, service maintenance, whatever's outside of warranty, then, an end user has to contact. It'd be whether it's your service tech team or somebody that's local. But if a robot system or a case erecting sealing system went down and they needed maintenance, once your warranty's passed, then typically you're paying for someone you're flying, somebody in. It's not inexpensive by any means, and then they will be on site for however long that is. And so that's traditional. So with machine as a service, you talked about it a little bit, but all of that's covered, right, under this contract. So the end user does not have to perform anything outside of your normal, I guess, PM.
Yeah, so here's how we're doing it.
Okay.
When we have an when we promote MaaS, traditionally what we would do is we'd sell them a piece of equipment, then we would also charge them for the installation, the commissioning of that piece of equipment.
Right.
That's all included. So let's say you buy a case erector, through the machine as a service model through Pearson Packaging Systems. We would actually build the equipment to their specifications so that it would meet their needs. We would do the installation and the commissioning. That's all included. There's no additional charge for that. And then once that machine, provide the appropriate operator, training and preventative maintenance training. Our model is actually, we're providing them, the end customer, we're providing them the spare parts on an as needed basis. So we're monitoring the performance of the equipment, the number of
Mhm.
cycles, and as they need, for example, cylinder rebuild kits or, kind of vacuum cups, things like that, wear items, we're actually sending that to them proactively at no additional charge. That's part of the per case rate. Now, we are relying on them, and this was feedback we got from customers. We're not installing most of the time. We're not going to be the company that's actually, they're going to have their maintenance personnel install those spares. And that
Yeah.
we came to that conclusion, not because we weren't willing to do it, but because we found that they have the infrastructure in place to do that. Many of them prefer to do that kind of on their own time because the variability of PM schedules and
Right.
openings and production windows, things like that. So we're not including that, we're not including service as part of this after the fact, just the initial installation and commissioning and then all the spares.
And the parts. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah. Yeah.
sense. And one thing too with the machine as a service models, this is completely flexible. Like you're able to customize it based on your tolerance for risk and, the obviously the end customer. Have you seen yourself getting real creative with contracts?
We're actually taking kind of a pretty standard approach to it, where
Okay.
we've come up with a fixed, per case, like if you buy, for example, a CE25 case erector, it's a fixed price per case, produced, really across the board. I mean, there might be some negotiation in there, but we've actually, so far, the way we've presented it to customers, we've presented it, kind of as, hey, here's the program, here's how it works. And there frankly hasn't been, really a lot of customization or negotiation or modifications to the contract.
It's great. So it's simple, straightforward for both parties.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits also, just really quickly, that we found is that, it kind of obviates the need to get bogged down in really terms and conditions negotiation. At the end of the day, they're not paying for it up front.
Right.
There isn't a 50% down, 40% prior to ship, 10% upon acceptance, site
Yeah.
acceptance, things like that. Really, the only terms and conditions we still have to negotiate would be things like liquidated damages or consequential damages, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but the other terms and conditions largely become moot, and so it's actually streamlined the process, I think, of getting things from being selected from a technical perspective to actually coming to a commercial agreement on the other end.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Have you had a customer that wants to know though if they're able to like let's say they love it, first year went really well, and they've got money now, maybe something's changed and they just want to buy it. Have you had that happen, or those conversations, are those presented at the beginning?
Yeah, we've had a lot of people who have asked that, thinking it's kind of an extension of, kind of like it's some sort of just a financing or a lease alternative, like
Right.
a rent to own for a period of time. The way we're taking that is we're not doing that.
Okay.
And again, we're not trying to be inflexible, but the model really is predicated on the fact that it's an asset that's on our balance sheet. We're providing them that output. And so if a customer really wants to, use MAS for a period of time and then acquire the equipment, really at that point we'll point them toward alternative terms and conditions that we can provide them, or maybe alternative forms of financing.
Right.
But it's that, and that's just an internal decision that we've made, but we've had
Sure.
several people who have asked that question.
Yeah, it's something that we hear, quite often. I think it's because people still can't really wrap their mind around that. It can't be that easy. It's
Right.
even though we've had like copiers, that's probably the best example I have. These large copy machines that we all have and use for scanning and printing. Most of those are set up on the machine as a service type of a program. We don't go out and spend 10 grand and buy them anymore. Um,
Right.
so I don't know. It's just you see I see customers struggling to just accept that it's really as simple as it sounds.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I think we're in the exact same boat. There's a lot. It's so different for our industry, especially on the secondary packaging side,
Mhm.
of things, that this model's kind of foreign to them, and they're kind of having to unlearn, some of the things that they've learned in the past about, capital equipment procurement.
Right.
So and frankly, that's slowed the adoption in some cases. People are really trying to understand, okay, what, kind of, how does this benefit us? But how does this benefit the OEM? Are we paying more? Are we paying less? What are the pros? What are the cons? And that's fine. I mean, we never really expected this to go through the roof, and 50% of our volume would be this in year one. And in fact, there's a lot of reasons why we probably don't want that to be the case.
Right.
We just want to start making incremental kind of inroads where we think, kind of, into this market. We really believe that over, maybe a 3 to 5 year period, maybe 20%, 25% of our business, could migrate to this, and with the majority of that being incremental revenue. Um, if it's a little bit more, great. If it's a little bit less, great. It's really an alternative. We're just trying to come up with something that actually is an alternative for our customers, so that they're able to automate processes that they need to automate, and that really that forges a partnership between really us and our end customers. And so we're just having to be patient as we work through this.
That's great. That was a question somebody else asked, is where do you see this in, 3 to 5 years? What percentage of your business? So you're thinking 20, 25% potentially.
Yeah, I would say 20, probably 25 to 20 to 25%. I would say that we do see the majority of these opportunities being incremental opportunities. You kind of asked the question a little
Yeah,
bit earlier about, or would we have seen customers invest in automation? We believe that that's going to be, in and above. Yeah, well, we think that those are largely going to be customers that otherwise wouldn't have automated the processes. We do have some customers that just they like the idea because it kind of de-risks the acquisition of that equipment,
right.
especially from a service and support perspective. So we think some people will choose it for that, but we're seeing probably 75% of the people, it's really an alternative form of procuring the equipment that they otherwise wouldn't be able to procure.
Do you think that 20 to 25% is higher in your opinion now because of the pandemic, or would you have said that back in early February?
Well, I'm not even factor. That's funny that you mentioned that. That's what we kind of thought it would be before the pandemic. We haven't changed our thinking yet, but I will, to increase that. That being said, with all the uncertainty that's going on, and we'll see what plays out over the next 6 months to a year in terms of,
Right.
therapeutic treatments, community, immunity, or a vaccine. If this persists, I would say that this model is tailor made to help customers automate processes in a time of uncertainty. And so I actually think that might increase, from that 20 to 25% if the effects of this are even longer standing
Yeah.
than we think.
Yeah, I would agree. That's kind of what we've been reading and people we've talked to. There's more people now, I believe, that are going to take automating processes more seriously than maybe they
Yep.
have in the past. So I think you're right, but we'll see how it plays out. And so let's talk about Steam Chain. How are you tracking your outlets, calling the outcomes, and how are you sharing that information with the end user, and how are you looking at it and both feeling good that, okay, this actually happened, here's an invoice, and then they say, oh yeah, perfect, let's, here's your payment. How's that all working?
Well, I mean, I think pretty well. I mean, it's interesting, to me, I'm probably not the best person to ask in terms of all the technology that's in it. To a certain extent, what they're doing is a little bit of a black box, but I would say that as soon as they understand really how blockchain functions and the fact that it is a distributed ledger system and it's the same set of data that we're all looking at,
Right.
there's very easy ways to audit it. If the data comes out, and it appears, it puzzles either us as the OEM or the end customer. It's very easy to go into the PLC and look at the number of cycles,
Right.
that have run, and actually kind of, I would say, almost audit, or double check, the accuracy. And so from our perspective, um, that's working well. And I think Steam Chain has created a methodology that's fairly simple, to understand. I
Mhm.
think people probably have more questions up front about it because it's kind of foreign to them that, well, wait a minute, you're just going to send us an invoice. How do we know? And I think once you walk them through that process, like there's several customers we're walking through right now, prospective customers,
Yeah.
and they're really wondering, well, how do we know, how do we agree, where's our opportunity to actually validate that you're billing us for output that we actually experienced? And what we're telling them is, hey, let's go into the PLC, let's look at the availability, let's look at some of the other performance metrics, and let's see if it makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's where the data is being pulled from anyway, but it's just another way of looking at it.
That's good though. That's a great point. So there is that backup. If someone says, "Well, I don't know, this doesn't seem right," you're able to go back to the PLC, pull the data, and it's there for both parties to see it.
Right, right. And again, that's where the data is coming from in the first place, but you,
Right.
you can actually look at it outside of the construct of what Steam Chain has done, and they're very familiar with that, and that's how they've traditionally measured that. And then the other thing is, you can really just look at their output. Have you seen, or why, it's just engaging in a dialogue with the customer potentially of, well, why do you feel that was overstated or understated? And look at like historical averages, look at the equipment, kind of month to month to month.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to find is those questions are probably going to occur in months 1, 2, and 3. But then once
Right.
you see that consistency, I think most of that will go away. But we're fairly early on in that, so haven't really gotten to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the one neat thing about Steam Chain. We'll give them a little plug here is that the dashboard, the way that you can view the information that's nice and clean, it's easy to understand, easy to drill down, get to the data that you need. So that the value that they're bringing to this space, I believe, is really important. And what they've done so far, we've been extremely pleased with.
Yeah, and we retrofitted an existing machine with a local company here. We don't do a lot of business in and around the Spokane area.
Right.
But when we wanted to test the efficacy, to your point, of their software, of their system, of that dashboard, we actually just asked an existing customer who's not an MaaS customer, hey, can we go ahead and retrofit, kind of this functionality? That was really kind of the alpha stage,
Yeah.
and just let's prove the efficacy, and it worked incredibly well. And I do have to give that same plug to Steam Chain, as they worked through the issues, very, very responsive. It's a pretty simple system, really. I mean, there's a lot of complexity going on in the background, but that's really invisible to us as the OEM and to the end customer.
Yeah, no, that's great. Terrific. All right, so there is a gentleman, Justin Rack from IFM Effector Incorporated. He's a sales engineer. He has a question for you, Michael, specific. He says, how do you capture data from your equipment currently, and what metrics/sources of information are important for your MaaS use cases? So I guess he's saying, how are you capturing equipment? So we've just talked about that. You're using the Steam Chain technology,
Yep.
blockchain, but what metrics are you looking at that are important, not just for the financial piece, but maybe he might be asking more about your equipment in general.
Well, one of the benefits actually of MaaS, and we have yet to realize this. I think this will be years down the road. One of the benefits is going to be, we're going to really be able to see much more transparently the actual failure modes that are occurring in real time, the amount of downtime that's created by those failure modes, and either intercede with, for example, potentially operator training if we deem that to be the case. It might be different component selection because we're seeing premature failures. It might even be just improving the design of the equipment and simplifying it because we're seeing, kind of maybe failures in the design of the equipment that are leading to certain circumstances, downtime. So really, at the end of the day, it's for the first time in real time, we're going to have the opportunity to kind of monitor this equipment. In the past, when customers kind of would experience downtime, they would just pick up the phone and say, hey, your machine's down. We need some help.
Right.
And you would either provide technical support or you'd go out into the field to do that. So really the metrics we're looking at are, what's the availability, the available time. We're looking at, kind of what are the failure modes, how many of them are occurring. We're looking at the throughput and the output to see if we're meeting their requirements, on a daily basis. If they expected X number of cases per shift, per hour, per day, whatever it might be, are we actually meeting that? So, I mean, there's a myriad of different ways to look at it.
Right.
But you're even able to see kind of, how the machines, are they cycle stopping it appropriately, or are they e-stopping it, different sorts of things, because we have that remote access. Some of that is provided by Steam Chain through their dashboard, and others, because we have that remote access, we can go into the PLC perhaps and actually look a little bit more closely to help diagnose the problem or the cause of the downtime remotely, which is a really positive thing.
Yeah, I mean, just the more you're talking about that, all of that information was invisible, right, to you over the past however many years, and now the more you get out there into the marketplace, the more data you're going to collect. It's just going to make your decisions even better going forward on your machines.
Yeah, and what was really interesting, I was just on a phone call a little bit earlier, and we were talking about predictive maintenance. Right now, predictive maintenance has always really relied upon the mean time between failure of individual components,
Right.
and then us monitoring, kind of typically on a periodic basis, how many cycles the piece of equipment has run, and then recommending, okay, you're going to need some cylinders, you're going to need new vacuum cups, things like new chain or belting. based on the number of cycles that the equipment is run, but it's never really been in real time. What's
Right.
really exciting about this is this platform requires remote connectivity really to fully function. Once you actually can convince a customer that that remote connectivity is a good idea, and you go and they adopt it, that opens up the ability for us to use different components with sensors, heat sensors, vibration sensors, things like that, so that we can monitor, for example, the temperature inside the control cabinet. We can monitor the temperature of a servo motor. You can monitor whether or not you're getting air leaks in your pneumatic system that's on the machine.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting to me, because then we can proactively start to call them up and say, hey, we're noticing that you might have a failure. We're going to send you a servo motor, because now, instead of waiting for it to go down, them having unintended downtime,
Right.
buying a spare part from us, we factored that in to the per case price. We can actually tell them that you might have a failure that's imminent, so that they don't actually have unintended downtime. They can address that in their next PM cycle.
Yeah.
And we've never had the ability. I don't think you guys have probably had the
Oh,
ability to do that either. And then our engineers can take that data and start to improve the design of the equipment, improve
right.
component selection, improve actual mechanical and control design. That's really exciting, and it's going to benefit not only customers, but I think OEMs as well. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about this, is that it opens up all those possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an amazing thing. So it really, one of the last questions, Michael, that it goes right along with what you're talking about. So remote connectivity, what's the pushback? I know, is it just fear of the unknown, or when you have companies that are pushing back and saying, "Oh, we don't, we're not going to allow you to have access. It's not who we are, what we do." What do you think, it's logical, or is it mostly just fear that they may have of
Well,
the unknown?
I mean, obviously they have those policies in place for a reason, and it's not really for me to kind of second guess them. I mean,
Right.
but at the same time, um, that is the biggest pushback we get is the security argument. It's, we don't really want to have, there's two. There's the security argument. We don't want to create potential vulnerabilities and create potential inroads for people, kind of getting into our network, or, and
Right.
onto our production floor.
Yep.
The second thing we hear from people is, we do have some customers who want to keep their production very, and the volumes of production confidential. And they
Sure.
worry, for example, if they've got a product and they have product A, product B, and product C, and it's, let's say it's a new product that they're introducing to the market. Well, if we're monitoring, product A, product B, product C, we actually can see kind of what volume of that product they're potentially shipping, or at least that's their concern, is that we would be
Right.
able to see that, and others would have access to that very, confidential data. Those are the two arguments that we really get. Now, what I will tell you is, I think the SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 pandemic have really changed things, because we've noticed, and I'm sure you're probably noticing the same thing. There are a lot of customers that 3 or 4 months ago wouldn't have allowed us to, implement remote access on their equipment,
Right. Yeah.
but are now actually aggressively implementing it on their equipment, so that we can support them without actually having to have people enter their facilities globally. And
Right.
so I think if there's one positive for our industry that really comes out of this, one of them is going to be that remote access is going to be kind of demystified, and won't be demonized
Right.
nearly as much as it would. We think there's going to be much greater adoption, which makes this a much easier sell, because I would say that's probably it's in the top two objections, is the remote access that we
Yeah.
get to MaaS.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And obviously, just for the end users that are listening, there's a confidentiality agreement that's executed. That information it's
Right.
not being shared with anyone outside of, like, for your case, Pearson and the end user. But yeah, we know, we hear it, and I think it's more of just the fear of the unknown, and it's different than maybe what something they've done in the past. But once you walk them through and they understand that you're just looking at, this specific data and that's it, then I think it's, people are more apt to listening and maybe moving forward with that type of a solution.
And I think, just like GDPR and things like that that you see kind of on the internet, it's like, what are you doing with that data? Are you keeping specific data? Customers don't really seem to want or seem to object to us, looking at performance data. It's just their proprietary data of what product is being run and
Right.
how. That's really easy to expunge that data, to not grab it in the first place. I
Yeah.
mean, they just want to know what protections are in place, and have we even thought about that? Are our networks secure? Where is all this residing? And that's the benefit of using, kind of, it's not like this information. I mean, it's a cloud-based system,
Yeah.
and so as a result, you're not relying on OEMs like, RōBEX or Pearson or whoever, to house this information. It's being it's being housed in a very, very secure environment that really the entire world's economy is dependent on. So it's
Right.
very
Yeah.
secure.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Well, that's excellent, Michael. Those were the questions that we had. I think if anything, for everybody that's listening, it gives them a nice overview of the concept of machine as a service. I do think more and more people are asking about it, at least from what we're hearing on our end, and we believe it's gonna continue to take off. And we appreciate you kind of leading the charge in this industry, in the space, and providing a lot of information. I know to PMMI and FANUC, you've done some things and some
Mhm.
speeches, and so thank you for all that you're doing for our industry. We really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
No, I really appreciate it, and I'm hopeful. I had a question earlier this morning from somebody about, hey, are you concerned about other people adopting it? And like you
Right.
guys adopted and have had some
Yeah.
success with it, which is great. We really want, we see this as an opportunity to better serve customers, not just Pearson, but RōBEX and the entire industry. And I think it's all in our best interest that other OEMs actually utilize this technology, because it lends credibility to it.
I
So I'm
agree.
really hopeful that, 5 years down the road, you're going to have 100 OEMs that are offering this. And it'll just expand really horizons for all of us. And it's not a proprietary thing. I think it's good for the industry, and will help OEMs like RōBEX, Pearson, and others really
Yeah.
prosper well into the future. So we're excited.
Great. Well, I totally agree, and want to thank you again for your time.
You
And
bet.
we'll talk with you soon.
Okay, well, stay
Thanks,
healthy, and
Michael.
thanks for the
Yes,
opportunity.
you too. All right. Bye bye.